Welcome to the Woodpreneur podcast, the best podcast for the business and marketing side of the sawmill, lumber, and wood industry. What's a woodpreneur? If you have a business where you make money as a woodworker, sawmill owner, selling slabs, or a content creator, then you're a woodpreneur. My name's Steve Larziliera, and I started Woodpreneur Life, Acres of Timber, and the Woodpreneur podcast just for makers, wood entrepreneurs, and small business owners just like you. We're on a mission to empower thousands of wood businesses to grow sustainably and put out great products. Each week, I interview makers, sawyers, content creators, and 6- and 7-figure entrepreneurs that know the wood industry inside and out. With topics covering everything from the urban lumber movement, sustainable sourcing and design, we'll discuss the ins and outs of how to grow, monetize, and fully immerse yourself in the woodpreneur lifestyle. If you're a hobbyist, a full-time wood business owner, part-time entrepreneur who wants to become a content creator, or quit your day job to pursue your dreams, the Woodpreneur podcast is just for you. Thanks so much for listening. Now enjoy this episode. Hey, welcome to a brand new episode of the Woodpreneur podcast. I'm your host, Steve. This is our 200th episode, and we're going to switch it up a little bit. Today, I have Ethan Abramson, who most of you know is my partner with the Building a Furniture Brand podcast, fastest growing podcast for furniture designers and makers out right now. Go and check it out. But he's also an amazing interviewer and a great person. And I thought for our 200th episode that I have him interview me. So when we did our 100th episode, I had Treg from Urban Timber out in Columbus. He was out in Columbus, Ohio. He was my very, very first guest. So I had him interview me. So I figured every 100 episodes, I have somebody else interview instead of me hosting. So anyway, thank you so much, Ethan, for doing this. And I do have to say it's been great collaborating with you since the pandemic.
Yeah, it's been great working with you too. And thank you so much for having me on as your guest host. You've done such a great job for 199 episodes. So, you can, you can sit back and put your feet up and
I can absolutely
relax and
sit in a hammock. Yeah.
There we go. There we go. So let's get into this. So, and for people who have decided, we're going to wait to see if this podcast goes anywhere. And they're like, okay, 199 episodes. I guess for the 200th, I'll tune in. So for those people, give a little backstory of you, who you are, your story up until now.
Yeah. So I started the podcast 6 years ago. This is like my 6-year anniversary of doing it. My background before that is just in marketing and entrepreneurship. I had a marketing company at first, my first career, and then shortly, I ran that for 3-4 years, and then I started working in the nonprofit field. I did that up until about a month earlier this month. I ran that for 18 years. So I have a lot of experience with marketing and entrepreneurship and starting businesses. And so my organization that I started, we mentor kids. I grew it nationally, helped over 10,000 kids. I raised lots of money. I built networks and marketed. So I did a lot of stuff. And then about 6 years ago, I came up with the idea to start this. And so this meaning, Acres of Timber. Back then it used to be called Sawmill Business. And the story is that when my wife first, when I was just dating my wife, she took me home to meet her family. Her dad knocked on the door in the morning and said, how'd you like to chop down a tree and mill it? And so I went out into the woods and we cut down a couple logs, and then we hauled it to a sawmill and we milled lumber. And her family comes from 2 generations of tree farmers and woodworkers and craftsmen. And I got fascinated, for 2 reasons. One is like, I'd hit a roadblock in my journey as an entrepreneur. It's like I devoted my life and my career to this nonprofit. And when you start something and there's kind of nowhere else to go, you need to learn new skills. I just became fascinated with the idea of woodworkers and like the lumber and sawmill industry. And and you're like, why? I was like, partly because my father-in-law, he was obsessed. He was like on his iPad if he wasn't in his shop, he wasn't in his mill, he was on the iPad in forums and Facebook groups, and he was on Craigslist looking for equipment and tools to buy. Like he was just obsessed. And so I was like, I kind of came across this line of thinking of like, all right, I'm going to start a new business, but instead of starting a new business based off of what I think is a good idea, what if I started a business based off of the passions of other people? So, and that's what happened. Like I just got curious and I called. I went through the process of emailing and having phone calls with, I ended up talking to about 50 different wood companies. And I asked them, what's their number one problem? And they'd ask why. And I'd say, because whatever the number one problem is, I'm going to start a business around that. And a couple of them hung up on me because they thought I was a jerk. And then other people, they would just talk to me for a few hours about their business. And I got to understand like what their challenges were. And I got to understand, it was like a research project. And I actually ended up writing a report, and it was like the state of the lumber and sawmill industry and I interviewed people, from like 20 different states, and I just got a really good understanding. And the number one problem was that nobody knew about them, marketing and advertising. And being that like my background is in marketing, one of the first things I did was I created an Instagram account. And back then, so the Instagram account, now Acres of Timber that I run, it used to be called Sawmill Business. And so all I did was just start sharing people's information and sharing their posts and growing a network. And then I use hashtag Sawmill Business. And then eventually I changed it to hashtag Woodpreneur and came up with the idea around Woodpreneur. And then I started to like work with some people, like people said, hey, I need help. I was like, it sounds like you need a marketing plan. So I'd write a marketing plan. Sounds like you need a website. You need a logo. And so I just started helping people because I did all of this stuff for free for my father-in-law. I built his website, got his logo, helped with his search engine marketing. I did all of this stuff for him because I love business and I love helping people and I love marketing. And then most importantly, like I love working with people that build and make stuff. And I started dabbling into it more and more, but I was like, I just love the process of making things. And, I even like growing up, like when I was younger, I had friends that made music, that made art. Like, I just love the creative process. And I just believe that if you make stuff and you love it and you're good at it, like you deserve to be paid really well. And if you have a business, like it should thrive. And so that's what I started to do. Like I started the Instagram account, I started helping people. And then I started the podcast a couple months later. And then it was all literally around building community, sharing information. And then, next thing you know, people started reaching out, like bigger companies. And I started using my marketing background. I just took what I used to do and then I applied it to a new industry. And so that kind of brings me up to today. The first couple of years of the podcast, I wasn't as consistent. And then I realized that like, wow, people are really getting some value for it. And so I was like, so it was, for the past maybe 3-4 years, it's just been like literally every week. I had no idea that I would even get to 200 episodes. It seemed kind of ridiculous. And I actually heard, we should talk about this offline, but like I heard that once you get to like 500 episodes of something weird happens, that we may need to start another one or something. But like, anyway, I'll do some more digging. But anyway, 200 episodes, it's crazy. Anyway, that brings us up to 200 right now.
That brings us up to where we are today
Yeah.
with a long backstory, but it is an impressive backstory. And there's a lot to talk about that you've done, and all of your marketing plus all that you learned about the woodworking community just fit very nicely into what you do today. And
Yeah.
6 years ago, I'm sure you didn't think I'm going to be at 200 episodes. I'm going to have interviewed 200, give or take, people for this show.
Yeah.
Why, when you started, yes, you loved the idea of learning about the community, and yes, you loved the business part of it. Why didn't you just keep that for yourself and grow your own business? Why did you think that it was important to interview people and then get their story out in this way, in a podcast form?
So, it's interesting. Is That's such a good question. Gosh, you're a good interviewer. There's one thing. So like in my own career outside of the wood stuff, I have had the opportunity to be interviewed and had my story come out, right? A lot, like, and one of the things that I found was, you have one, to be able to have the platform to tell your story is not only going to inspire other people, but it is also inspiring for yourself, right? Like, for you, humble brag, you're on the cover of a magazine in January, right? And like many times for a lot of the people that I've interviewed, like being on a podcast is like, I'm their very first time ever getting press about anything that they've ever done. And so I wanted to share that feeling, but I also wanted to add a voice to all these different posts that are going on Instagram, right? Like I wanted to hear the texture of somebody speaking and like all of that stuff behind the scenes, and to just learn, like to learn what people are going through and to hear their voice, to hear their struggle. Like, and I just interviewed this couple the other day, a couple of weeks ago, Mike and Cindy, and they were telling their story, and they were saying like, all this stuff that they went through and in order to get where they are. And I was like, man, I started getting choked up a bit. I was like, you don't really hear that from a reel or a Facebook post, you know what I mean? And I like the idea of people tell me like, yeah, I listen to you while I'm working, and, knowing that I can provide like texture or context to what you're doing. Like that was something really appealing to me, to be able to like, I feel like in business, so many times we get caught up in our own business that we forget that there are other people going through similar things. And then to be able to have the opportunity to listen and learn about your business while you're doing your business, you know what I mean? Like it's even deeper. There aren't too many like industries where you can actually do that. And there's a community behind it. You know what I mean? Like woodworkers, like you could literally be standing and listening to your voice or my voice. Not that you would listen to your own podcast. Do you listen to your own podcast? I never listen to my own podcast.
Who's doing the interview?
I know.
I know this is a show dedicated to you and to your accomplishments. For 200 episodes, that is a tremendous amount of work. And I do want to celebrate you, and I do want to get more into your story. But I also know that you like to give back to the community. You like to give your knowledge that you've learned to the community and to people listening to what you're saying. So you're in a unique situation where you've done all of these episodes as an interviewer, you've heard all of them, but you've also been interviewed a lot of times. So, and you also referenced that a lot of times there are people who are just starting to be interviewed, or they're just starting to put their business into the spotlight. So from your experience, from both sides of the microphone, what's some advice that you could give to people who maybe are jumping on an interview for the first time? And how should they portray themselves to, yes, be true to themselves and the image that they want to put out there, but also to present themselves in a professional way that they'll be seen in a good light?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like I always talk about this with, people that I work with. It all comes down to being as vulnerable as possible, right? Like vulnerability and like almost like shedding a layer, getting below the surface and start telling more stories and speaking from your heart, right? Um, you know, if you're able to get to that point, then what you're doing is really connecting with the listener, but you're also allowing the person that's interviewing you to be more warmer and to take more risk in asking you better / deeper questions, because it's almost like you gave them permission to just go a little bit more deeper, right? And as an interview, that's what you want. You want to be able to like you want to be able to just to be able to get to the heart of the matter and to have the person truly reveal themselves. Like I'm trying to remember if anybody has ever said, "Oh, I don't want to talk about that." But like I lately I've been finding that like if you can connect to somebody on one thing, like I remember I interviewed this guy named PJ Fetcher, right? He's down in Florida. And we just went on this rant about Lucas Sawmills. And it was just like, oh, Lucas this, Lucas that. And then that kind of got him comfortable so that we can go a little bit more deeper. You know what I mean? Like if you can find something, and also too, like if you can make the interview, if you're being interviewed, you can make the your interviewer feel more comfortable, like almost like you did your research on them, right? And then you can reveal some of that. It becomes more of a like a conversation, and that's what I like more about my podcast. It's like I like a conversation. And whenever I interview people, before I interview, I was like, just pretend like we're old friends having coffee. That's literally the vibe. Like, I just pretend like we're old friends having a coffee in the afternoon or something. So.
Well, after doing this for 6 years, I'm sure a lot of people are old friends with your voice, and
Yeah.
they feel like they've grown up with you.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, I just there's a review, and I actually got to meet a person who left a review, and he said, "I love the podcast, but I wish you would stop typing while doing the interview." And I was like, shoot, like, and I was like, I used to mess up. I used to like multitask while I was doing interview. And then after a while, I was just like, let me just take this super seriously and do some research and be prepared. And now it's more about like, all right, how do I connect to the person? So I'll spend some time looking at their social media and their stories, just to kind of really get a sense of the person, so that I can, everybody, it's so crazy. The world is, we're all the friggin' same, and we all want the same things. We literally all want the same things, and we're all the same. We just had grew up with different life experiences, like, so that's why I'm grateful for this podcast, that I got to connect with people that I literally would never meet in under any other circumstances. There's no reason for me to speak from any, and it's been global too, right? So like I talked to people in Australia, New Zealand, Sweden, all over the US, and it's just been a real blessing. I'm really grateful for it.
I like that your global perspective includes 3 countries and then all of America.
Well, let me see if there's anybody else. UK, France. Nowhere else. There's no other woodworkers else in the world. So
now, you have had a lot of episodes and you've talked with a lot of people. And obviously, when questions like this are asked, you don't want to play favorites. So I'm just going to put an asterisk on this where every single episode you've done has been your favorite. And you can say, my favorite episode was insert episode here. But let's talk about some unexpected things from episodes, something that, as somebody who's done a lot of these, you can get into a little bit of a rhythm. And sometimes some things knock you out of that rhythm and you really stand up and take notice because they change your perspective on how you look at not only the interview process, but also the industry as a whole. So looking back over your wide range of episodes, does anything really stand out to you that has changed your perspective on the industry?
You know, I'm thinking, so I interviewed this one person and I think I took too long to get their interview out and they like kind of like ream me out in email. And I took too long to put out his episode and he reamed me out on email and he blocked me on Instagram. And after that, I was like, I need to really honor people's time and their voice. And if they're going to take time to share their story, I should get their story out in a reasonable amount of time, you know? And it was probably during one of those moments where I was like, multitasking, I had a bunch of other things going on and I wasn't prioritizing the podcast. And that was one thing. The other thing that, and it was actually you doing your podcast, and I saw the care that you put into your interviews. And like, I mean, we all, for those that don't know, like, you know, I collaborate with, like, Ethan produces his own podcast and, you know, we host it, we do the show notes like at my company. And the thing that I saw in listening, I love listening to your podcast because like the music and the edit, it's just like, you make it feels like a warm lounge type feel. And I was like, oh, I need to add more of my own flavor to the podcast. And so one of the things that I did was I started treating all of my interviews and all the end of them as a coaching consulting call. Like I give advice at the end of every single episode. And I know that I was really because I was like, I saw how you brought your own flavor to the podcast. And I was like, oh, I can add my own flavor. What's my own unique gift that I can give? I was like, oh, I can help people because that's what I do. Like, and so, you know, so yeah, so that's another thing that it was like unexpected as well. So you inspired me.
Oh. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And for my 200th episode, I'll replay that clip. So
yeah, so you feel good. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. But yeah, the idea of a conversation and going from your last answer and also this one, a conversation with people is very, very important when you're sharing their story. And yes, you know, the respect that you have for their story and for their time. And it is an important thing when you are interviewing people. And I know that life does get in the way and you are not an only professional podcaster. You have many other things going on, but you do take time out of your day to put this on and to share it with the community. And over 6 years, I don't want to keep coming back to that, but you know, it's a long time and it's a lot of work. And you have, you know, there's ups and downs with everyone, but you know, you've put in work for this community.
Thanks, man. I'm excited to do more for sure. I think, you know, there's a really big upside to what we do. And I say it because it's like, as long as like IKEA is selling billions of dollars of furniture in West Elm and Pier 1, keeps selling furniture. I was like, and the fact that like only a small percentage of the world is really getting these custom, custom pieces, and the fact that like the idea of sustainability and FSC and urban lumber like is not even well known yet. Like that's a big opportunity for people, you know what I mean? That's a big opportunity. There's nothing but growth out there for furniture makers and woodworkers. Like there's nothing but upside, you know. So I mean, we saw with the pandemic, people got busier, right? Businesses got like more blown up, right? There were about a month of uncertainty, but then when people really settled in, they're like, hey, I need more work, I need this, right? And who was there to do it? Like people that can create custom one-off pieces, right? And the more local the better. And local became a story because there were no supply chain issues, right? Like, so as it relates to local. So anyway, I'm excited for just continue to grow the industry a lot, help empower businesses. I think, like I said, I interviewed this couple the other day, and I hopped on an Instagram live, and I gave this was last spring when I was living in Michigan, and I was like, I was giving advice on the Instagram live, and then this guy hopped on the Instagram live, and he was like, hey, I took your advice and I started selling more stuff. I started selling my furniture more, my wood products more. And I pulled him on the Instagram live, and I was like, hey, tell me what's happening. He was like, hey, I listened to, your stories and your podcasts, and I started taking action on what you were doing, and I'm making money now. And he was like, he's got a stay-at-home wife, 2 kids. And I was like, oh man, that's so great. I was like, so what do you need help with? He's like, I need wood. It's like, wood's so expensive. Like he worked at a supermarket. Like he wasn't, he was just kind of barely just making it. And one of my followers was like, ship them a box of slabs, right? Like you just ship them a bunch of stuff, like just for free, just for him to make some money. And I was like, yeah. He was like, and I just interviewed him. He was like, yeah, if it wasn't for your podcast and the motivation behind it and all of the things that you teach, it's like, I wouldn't be in this position now. It's like, shit, that's amazing. Like that's proof right there. Like your dreams are literally right there. All you need to do is just take action, believe in yourself, right? We talk about that a lot, right? Like the mindset of like service and delivering value. And that's everything. So
taking a step back from the business side, because everybody listening wants to make money. I'm putting that as a blanket statement, no matter how that works or is formed in your mind. Everybody is looking to make money in business. And that's a lot of reasons people tune into our shows and shows like ours to look at how other people are making money and talk more and learn more about that. But taking a step back from the business side and hearing stories like that and other experiences, and I'm sure you've had a lot of them over the years, there's an emotional component to sharing people's stories and watching those people grow through either your advice or just their own business and seeing them years later. And that isn't a monetary thing for you. That is an emotional connection that you have. When you share somebody's story, you have a connection to them. So let's talk about the emotional side of these 200 episodes and how that affects you and how you've come to understand that these stories that you're sharing are now a part of you.
Yeah, I just recently did a re-interview with my first female guest. Her name was Megan Offner from New York Heartwoods. You know them? New York Heartwoods? Yeah. And it was like 6 years later, and it's so interesting to know that like you've met somebody like 6 years ago, and like you kept in touch loosely, but then you see people grow. And I feel like that's like from like, I guess from my perspective, it feels good to know that I'm part of something bigger, and that my podcast is a small part of other people's story, right? Like I got, the idea that people are putting the link to my interview on their website and on their social, and they're sharing it with their grandmother. Like literally somebody said, hey, this is my first podcast, I'm going to share it with my grandmother, like, or their wife, right? Or they can play it for their kids, right? It's humbling. I think as I started the thing, like I've been fortunate enough to do a lot of things in my career, and I've been the recipient of a lot of things. And I started my career with like, hey, I lived a blessed and fortunate life. It wasn't without its challenges, but like I lived a blessed and fortunate life. I need to start giving back. And so the idea of like giving back as being part of my career has been my career. And so it's humbling. It's really humbling. And if I probably sit down, even if I give myself permission, I'll probably even get more overwhelmed at the idea that like I spent, 200 hours of talking to people over 6 years, and God knows how many hours into this space that I didn't think it was gonna be this long. I didn't think. And like one of my podcast guests was Jake from Olag and Sawmill, and now we're business partners, right? Like I didn't anticipate that at all. But I'm grateful for it. I'm really, really grateful for all the opportunities and all of the relationships and all of the conversations. That it's yeah, like I said, if I give myself permission, I'll probably be super overwhelmed. So,
well, let's lighten the mood a little bit. This is a celebration, after all.
Yeah.
It's a celebration of you and all that you've accomplished. And there is that emotional side that you've experienced a connection with all these people. And that's amazing. But let's take it to another part. And let's say you were talking about opening up, and how when you're a guest on a show, you need to open up and you need to really put that out there. And that's what the best interviews are. On your computer. See, you didn't learn.
I know.
That's what the best interviews are all about. So as somebody who people only hear your voice, and it's only a one-way conversation because they're just listening to you, they can't ask you questions. Let's ask some basic questions about you.
Okay.
Let's start with, what's your favorite color?
It's this orange right here. This color, I've been wearing it a lot, and it's just like it feels really good. It kind of reminds me of when I was living in Michigan last year, and I'd take these long walks in the woods, and I had to wear an orange hat so the hunters didn't shoot me. So now that I'm living in Chicago and back here, it's taking me back to to my time in the woods. It's probably this orange.
There you go. And
Yeah.
I'm guessing that asking a favorite color and then pointing to a color on a
on a podcast.
On an audio-based podcast.
It's
Doesn't
not a
help,
good.
but yeah, I'm
It's
sure.
orange.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's just use the power of our voices to explain it. What's your favorite type of wood, not only to work with, but just in general? It's a broad question, I know, but as somebody who is in the woodworking community as deep as you are, you have to have an answer for that.
Yeah, I know. And like, I would say like the crazy spalted maple. Like, I just love it. And then I just came across I have some, oh shoot, I don't have any here. Olive wood is pretty cool. Um, you know, red oak. I spent a lot of time with red oak. A lot of time. So probably those, the crazy maple swirls, and I love that stuff. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it has, and I can see that you like that because it has that graffiti street art kind of
Yeah.
that feel, which I know is a part of your vernacular, your visual vernacular when you're thinking about designs and things like that. So
Yeah. No, I love it. I mean, and also too, just like simple finishes, like on stuff, like oil-based finish. I just love that. Yeah, it's really cool.
Since this is a party for you,
Yes.
what's your favorite food? If you were having an actual party for this, what would be the food that you'd want served at this party? And I know that people listening are like, this conversation took a weird turn, and
it's kind of weird.
And this isn't fun.
But I appreciate it.
But it is if somebody's listening to you for all this time, they should know a little bit about you, even though it is a little silly. But yeah, let's learn about you.
For sure. So if I had any food, so I like Indian food a lot, like naan and like curries, and I love that stuff. And I like barbecue a lot. So I'd have barbecue and Indian food and Pepto-Bismol. But yes, that was
Well, thank you for going down that and checking off 3 of the most asked questions about you. We can get back to the business side, and we talked about the emotional side and what you took away from interviewing all these people on the emotional side. But getting back to the business side, which is what we're all really tuning in for, to get our business better. What is something that you've learned over these 6 years doing this from this podcast, business-wise, about the industry or about running a business in general, that was a very big takeaway for you, that you feel influenced the way you look at the woodworking business moving forward?
I think one thing that I think about is literally all. So I started posting more mindset type work, right? Like mindset type content. And I realized that like this sort of the I've interviewed some bigger influencers or people with large followings on the podcast. And the one thing that I said is like that I've learned is like being obsessed with the process and being very particular as to the quality that you want in your product. Like that's something that I learned. Another thing that I learned is that like, again, I started off by saying mindset, like you just have to have the right mindset. Meaning that like, like not being afraid to show yourself and be yourself. And because if you are able to be yourself and show yourself, it allows you to connect to people on a different level. And the beauty about social media, and you might have noticed, we talked about it before we started recording, was that like, yeah, I kind of been going crazy on Reels, right? And I got to tell you that like my traffic overall to my page and my DMs have gone up tremendously because of it. And I feel like it's because people, um, I'm connecting to people in a different way. And that's the beauty with social media, is that, like, if this was 30 years ago, the only way that I would know about you is if I walked by your shop, or if I had a yellow pages, right? If I had a yellow pages and I happen to be looking, like, there was no Google, right? But like, now we all have the ability to be our own storefront, and we could be our own quirky, nerdy, outlandish self as possible. But that takes a certain mindset in order to be like that. And so half the battle with the people that I work with is to just get them to just be themselves, and, show their tattoos, play their music preferences, like, because there are people out there for you. They just need to know that you exist. And it probably is the next thing, is like, audience is everything. So like, we're not necessarily in the woodworking business, we're in the audience building business. And the more you have a larger audience, or a more engaged audience, the better it is for you. And then that audience needs to be inspired by your mission, your vision, your values, and needs to feel like they are part of your success and you are part of their success, right? And so those are probably, I mean, there's so much more, but I feel like those are the biggest things, like being yourself, attention to and obsessed with your product, and then like building an engaged audience, so that, because the audience you can take anywhere with you, right? And especially if people come to you for value, and you can literally see this, and I'm just aiming to provide as much value to people as possible. And at the same time, I learn, right? Like, I learn what's working, I learn what's not working. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, the best way that I could explain it is like, how if you drive anywhere, whatever, and you see a bench and it has a real estate person and it has their face on there. If you're driving on the highway and you see a bunch of injury accident attorney billboards and signs, they all got their face out there. Like, that's literally you. You can't really hide behind your furniture. It's got to be you in front of it.
Great words from a podcast host.
Yeah.
But it is true, you have to share your own story along with the people that you're interviewing, or you have to share your own story with the world, because that is the world that we live in today, where there is a niche for everybody, and everybody can find their own path being themselves, and they don't have to be somebody else. So let's end this interview with some words from you, some genuine advice from you. You've given a lot over the years. You've shared a lot of your thoughts. You've shared a lot of things that are on your mind, but here's your chance at the end of your party and the beginning of another run of 200 episodes to share some advice that either you've heard from somewhere else, you've come up with on your own, or that has really guided you through your journey up to this point.
So this is a great way to end the podcast. One of my favorite quotes ever, and has been really a big driver for me, is one by Jay-Z. And Jay-Z said, 9 to 5 is how you survive. I ain't trying to survive. I'm trying to live it to the limit and love it a lot. And that's been a very big motivator for me. It's like, it's like 9 to 5 is not necessarily just about that job. It's about this sort of frame. It's like this condition that you have to do this from this time to this time, and you got to do this and this and this. And I was like, yeah, the idea of just making it. I don't want to just make it, nor the people that I know and care about, the people that I work with, my clients, whoever. It's like, no, that's we're not just gonna make it. We're gonna thrive. We're gonna overcome things. We're gonna grow. We're gonna build. We're gonna, eat. We're gonna get wealthy together. Like that's my motto. It's like, and part of it too came from like my first business, where when you go off and you do things alone, it's when you go off and do things and nobody else is there around you, it can feel very lonely. And I always wanted to do things where you're in community together, which is why I started a nonprofit. Like, I didn't want to go snowboarding by myself, so I started a snowboard mentoring program. Like, that's literally, I wanted to snowboard with people. Like, and one of the reasons why I started, a community. So I love community. And so if you get plugged into a community, which is everybody's kind of going along the same path and not thinking this sort of linear way, all amazing things can happen. So kind of get out of the 9-to-5 survive kind of mindset, and think more abundant. Like, think that's like, nature's abundant. There's so many trees out there. Like, nature provides, nature's abundant. And so why can't that apply to your own life? And why can't that apply to your own business?
You've definitely built a substantial community around yourself, and you've helped out a lot of people and shared your story and your knowledge, and have taken in other people's story and other people's knowledge and helped to share that. So from myself and from the community at large who's listening to you, we just want to say thank you for 200 episodes, and looking forward to seeing where this goes, and hopefully 200 more. And I'm going to have to check to see if we can get the rights to play that Jay-Z song on the outro. But if not, then everybody should just hum it to themselves.
Hum it to themselves. Yeah.
Fade out on that.
Dude, that's cool. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to interview.
Thank you. Really appreciate you taking the time to make this all happen for everybody. So thank you.
Thanks for checking out the latest episode of the Woodpreneur podcast. If you found value and love what you listened to, please subscribe, rate, and review so that more people can learn about our mission and vision. Lastly, join our community, the Woodpreneur membership community. It's a marketing and training program to help you market and build your wood business past 6 figures. Give it a test and apply what you learned to your business.